I would call it a small victory for the ACC in court against Florida State on Monday, but why it's not over and what happens next.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The same way we told you a few weeks ago after the previous hearing in Florida, why we called it a small victory for Florida State back then. Battle won, war far from over. I would say the same thing about the ACC's dub today. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. We are Locked On ACC. Thank you so much for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. Shout out to the everydayers. We love you. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available free on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So, Kenton, I would sum up the hearing in Leon County where Florida State is suing the ACC. ACC wants Florida State's case dismissed. They want the jurisdiction to be only in North Carolina. Florida State, of course, wants it only to be in Florida. It seemed to me that Florida State's lawyers were not prepared with their arguments. And the Honorable Judge Cooper told them as much because his ruling, he granted an order for dismissal with leave to amend. So FSU's attorneys are going to have to amend their complaint and clearly state why their lawsuit should be heard in Leon County in that amended complaint. Judge Cooper went out of his way to say, I'm not ruling against FSU. I'm not ruling they have no case. He said the case is not over. The case will continue. So now Florida State, Kenton, who I think the judge was a little frustrated that their complaint was not, quote unquote, in plain English. So they're going to have to refile. They're going to have 7 days maximum to refile. Then the ACC is going to have 20 days to respond to the refiling the amended complaint. And then they're going to have a new court date. The judge did not commit to a specific date. He says he has to check his calendar. But at some point after the next 27 days, they're going to schedule another hearing, and around we go.
So it seems like the June 30th date is pretty much up in smoke, huh?
Yeah, that so people have claimed that the ACC will crumble by June, completely collapse by June 30th, 2024. It's looking a bit unlikely that it's going to meet that timeline now.
Interesting. Very interesting. But I'll tell you this, this is a lot like when you get a bad grade, but the teacher likes you in college and they're like, hey, I'm going to give you another shot at this thing. I'm going to give you another crack at it. Please do it better this time. Read the instructions this time. Do it right. Obviously, this doesn't bode well for Florida State. But again, the fact that they're getting another chance, like you said, it means this is not over. It means this is not a definitive victory for the ACC to claim and kind of put their flag down and say, hey, we won. It's over. Pay us our 500 M's or shut up and stay. It's not that type of situation. There's more at play here, and there's obviously going to be a rebuttal. There's obviously going to be coming back because Florida State is so passionate about this thing and wants it to go in Leon County. So, this is one of those moments that looks like it could be a bigger domino in the succession of things that happen here. But this is far from being the last domino to fall.
Yeah, and I'll admit when I first read the ruling that the judge was demanding an amended complaint to give Florida State a do-over, my initial thought was, man, that sounds like some home cooking in Leon County. That's the county where Tallahassee is, of course. But here's the thing, though. That was my initial thought, and there may be some home cooking in that. However, I have seen several attorneys say that that's not an uncommon thing in cases like this to ask for an amended complaint, because again, like in the judge's words, he's not saying Florida State's arguments are invalid. He's saying that they're not clear. And this is a bit from Knowles 24/7, their 24/7 sports page. The ACC argued that the currently amended complaint from FSU fails to sufficiently make those arguments. Judge Cooper, they said, seemed to share that the feeling of insufficient language on FSU's legal team's part in the current amended complaint, at one point asking Rush, that's Florida State's attorney, why things weren't stated in plain English regarding those specific terms, drawing a clear connection between the league, the business it does in Florida, and why that should specifically impact jurisdiction. So just to make this clear, the matter at hand is personal jurisdiction. like why in Florida State's minds the case needs to proceed in Florida, that Florida laws should apply to them and not just the laws in North Carolina. So that's the issue that this judge needs to decide definitively if this case is going to be heard in the state of Florida or not. Now, there is something else, Kenton, that I took away from this that I don't know. This would probably bode in Florida State's favor. A recommendation that the judge made, Judge Cooper. This from 24/7 Sports. Judge Cooper also said this doesn't mean it's going to happen, but he wants mediation ordered within the next 120 days between the two parties. He pushed for both parties to understand that they know what the issues are and that the time has come for them to discuss. So obviously, if it does get to mediation, you would think that that the settlement that they would come to would obviously in some way, shape, or form involve Florida State leaving the ACC. The question is, would that happen closer to the ACC's terms, which would mean you pay us hundreds of millions of dollars, or closer to Florida State's terms, which would mean $140 million or less? So the judge in Florida is pushing for mediation. And if that were to happen between 4 months, 120 days, then obviously that could mean maybe at some point an agreement could be reached between the two sides. But it seems like they're really far apart right now, Kenton.
Yeah, and it doesn't make sense for the ACC to not dig in their heels because, like we talked about, you're talking about your survival. We're not talking about, hey, it's nice to have Florida State. We're talking about if Florida State and Clemson leave, you now have an entirely different situation working in terms of your TV deal that could tear the whole thing apart. So again, if we weren't talking survival, if we were talking, it's nice to have, we could maybe see that sitting down and saying, let's work this thing out. If we were talking about a situation where Florida State was crushing it in Leon County, I could see potentially where there was like, all right, let's talk and sit this thing out. The ACC has absolutely zero motivation and zero reason to do that at this point.
Yeah. So again, we don't have a definitive date set for the next hearing, but we do know Florida State has 7 days to amend their complaint. But then the ACC also gets 20 days to craft their legal response to that. So, I guess like just based on the fact that, because honestly, after the first hearing a couple weeks ago, Kenton, it seemed like Judge Cooper was like really close to saying, hey, this is going to have to proceed in Florida. We're not going to the motion to dismiss will be denied. The case is going to happen here. I was kind of expecting that to come down today. So, if you're going to have to score this in somebody's win column, you definitely score it in the ACC's win column, but we're not really going to know until we see what that amended complaint looks like from Rush in Florida State.
Yeah, for sure. And there's so many elaborate parts of this thing that are moving and grooving and all that, but we're doing our best to bring you all the information as we get it. And right now, the information that we're getting is painting a picture of Florida State being asked to go back to the drawing board and kind of work this thing out so that it's more plain, so that it's more simple, so that it's not something that's convoluted and it's, drawing straws to kind of put things together that don't naturally fit together. So all in all, I would say, again, this is not the end of this. This is not us saying Florida State has lost in court and they're going to have to pay $500 million. This is us saying that this was a loss today that they're going to have to get back and regroup from if they want any chance of leaving under their own terms or under terms that are lesser than that $500 million payout in essence.
When we come back, we have to revisit the new college football playoff television deal because, yes, it's definitely a deal that favors the SEC, the Big Ten, the Power Two. Now we get a little bit more insight as to why that deal is favorable to the Power Two, because the Power Two basically gave an ultimatum to the college football playoff and to ESPN. We'll talk about what that looks like and how that affects the ACC, the Big 12, and the rest of the pack. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. And I'm only getting started with Game Time. The Game Time app takes the stress out of buying last-minute tickets to sporting events. I got last-minute playoff tickets to the Florida Panthers game the other day. My son and I got to watch an awesome victory. And folks, Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. Procrastinators, we get rewarded, guys, with last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Guys, I've gotten Marlins tickets, Florida Panthers tickets, Miami Heat tickets at insane prices. We've gotten tickets to shows, concerts, musical theater. I got my wife tickets for Hamilton a couple of months back down here in South Florida. The thing that I love about Game Time, one of the many things I love about it, are the all-in prices. They show you exactly what you're going to pay right up front. They don't slap on those hidden fees that some of the other guys try to do. You get exact views from every seat in the venue and the lowest price guarantee, which means if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. We got Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack with us. So, Kenton, Ross Dellinger put out a piece on more details on how the college football playoff format came to be, including comments from SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, who's also speaking on behalf of Tony Petitti, the commissioner of the Big Ten. So Dellinger writes, after the Pac-12's collapse, the swelling of other leagues and increased pressures of athlete revenue sharing, the sport's two juggernaut conferences negotiated a one-sided deal, in part by using a lingering belief that they would abandon all the others to form their own postseason. Would the SEC have really taken its proverbial ball and left the college football playoff, he asks. Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, told Yahoo Sports, absolutely. Quote, when we ended that set of meetings in January 2022 without a decision, it was clear, if you're going to walk away from this opportunity, we are going to reevaluate our position on format, revenue sharing, and governance. He said, people called me after the latest deal and said, why did you take a hard line? Why did you put us in this position? I said, you guys walked away from the deal. He's talking about previous negotiations 2 years ago, by the way. Yahoo Sports spoke to more than 24 stakeholders across the industry, some directly involved in the negotiations, to learn more about how the CFP's new structure came together. And so that's, Kenton, I don't think I'm surprised that this is what happened. I guess I'm maybe a little bit surprised that Sankey is like so proud to say it to everyone who will listen. But yeah, we did suspect that when that deal came about, which by the way, the revenue distribution, Big Ten and SEC each earn 29% of the CFP revenue, while the ACC gets 17.1%. The Big 12 receives 14.7%. The remaining amount goes to the group of 5 teams and independents like Notre Dame, who gets about 1%. So it's a very one-sided TV deal. And our theory had been the SEC and the Big Ten are making them believe, if you guys don't give us a much bigger cut of the revenue, we're going to take our ball, go home, and form a new league. Oh, you're muted.
And that's what they should have made them do. It's embarrassing to see that, you agreed to terms to say, oh, well, we need you all so badly that we'll take half of what you're getting in essence. Oh, well, we need you all so badly that we'll take crumbs as long as it means we get to eat off the same plate as you in some regard. If you want to take your ball and go home, go for it. Go for it. What are you going to? Oh, okay, great. We're going to have that situation where we once again are talking about, well, we just know these teams are the best just because we know they're the best. Not that they played other teams that actually won it. We just gave it to them because, hey, they're the conferences with the best team, so that's it, right? Like, no, that's not how it works. If you look in the last 10 to 15 years, all of the championships are not in the SEC or Big Ten. That's just a fact. That's just a fact. Now, are a majority with the SEC? Yes. Have the Big Ten won too? Yes, in that time. But so is the ACC. The ACC has won multiple in that time. So what are we doing here with this whole like, oh, we just need them so much? You don't know what's going to happen or how it's going to happen. You don't know how you don't know how Nick Saban leaving Bama is going to affect Bama. You can say all you want about, hey, Kalen DeBoer is a great coach and he's won everywhere he's been and we're sure he's going to win at a high level at Bama. Sure. That's been said about plenty of coaches who went to the SEC and all of a sudden they weren't that guy anymore. So then what? What if Bama's not that team anymore? What if Georgia, Kirby Smart, stopped being as elite, as dominant? Then what? Then what are we doing? You're setting yourself up in a situation to where you agreed and bent the knee for what? Because you needed something as opposed to nothing. It's soft. It's embarrassing. And the fact that Greg Sankey is out here screaming this to everybody who will listen, he's doing that because he knows it's embarrassing. He's doing that because he knows, I don't just want to beat you. I want you tarred and feathered. I want you running through the streets and everybody knowing we got one over on those bums. We own those little brothers because that's who we are.
I mean, it's sheer and utter elitism is what it is. And, you can remember, Kenton, a few months ago when the ACC and the Big Ten formed that like advisory committee to just talk to each other and not talk to anyone else. And then, the headlines that came out of that, which we didn't believe for a second, were, hold on, no, don't worry. They're not even going to discuss the possibility of breaking away. They want to align their vision since they're similar now in the super conference landscape. I mean, absolute misinformation that came out of that. Like they were clearly planning this attack and they were planning this negotiation to say, hey, we are, like you said, we're going to tar and feather the college football playoff, and we're going to do that to the remaining two quote unquote power conferences, the ACC and the Big 12, and everybody else that stands in our way. Like there was, not in an illegal way, but there was collusion that was happening between those two parties, which is fine. That was their right to do that. As a means towards this end. Okay. But it is absolute college football elitism because, definitely now we are seeing a sport where, for better or for worse, and there's some of this that I do embrace, like players being able to make money. I'm all cool with that because for a long time they have deserved it. Right. But it's definitely not, your father or your grandfather's college football. It's no longer an amateur sport. It's all about the TV money. It's all about the ad dollars. And listen, I'm going to keep watching. I'm not going to boycott the game, no matter how elitist and money grab this stuff becomes. Unfortunately, or fortunately, maybe, because I love college football, I'm still going to be here for the ride.
Yeah, and that's the reality of this thing is a lot of people won't. How do I put this as nicely as possible? The reality of this thing is when the Big 12 and the ACC agreed to this, they did so, I'm assuming, with the hope that this type of thing wouldn't happen, that this public thing wouldn't happen where it's like, we're better than you. Y'all are just kind of along for the ride. Y'all aren't driving the car. Y'all are just in the back seat, maybe you're on the third row, just hoping to get a song in every now and then. They probably were hoping that this type of thing wouldn't happen. But anybody with two functioning brain cells, anybody who there's something going on in their head besides the monkey clanging the cymbals repeatedly, had to know that this was going to happen. Had to know. Yeah. Sankey can't get enough of hearing himself talk. He can't get enough of it. He's on TV all the time. He's on ESPN so much you would assume that the ACC doesn't have a deal with ESPN the way that he's always on and talking, and we never see the same from Phillips. This is embarrassing. It is shameful. And again, if I'm looking at the ACC, again, I have always said, as much as people say, oh, I hate Florida State and Clemson and anybody trying to get out of the conference, I strongly disagree with that. Knowing who the leadership is right now and knowing how soft he's been on how many things, I would be the first person to ask in my school, what's the feasibility of us leaving? Because I'm not sure that I want to be a part of such a soft-chinned conference, because that's in essence what the ACC looks like right now, a bunch of schools with a really soft chin that will take whatever comes their way so long as they're just in the same room, so long as they're blessed to bequeath the SEC and Big Ten with their presence. And it's just embarrassing.
Well, I'll tell you why the ACC and the Big 12 accepted these terms at the end of it, and I think it's really important when I read through the issues that were ironed out with this contract. The reason why the ACC, I would imagine, ultimately agreed to accept this deal. I got to dig pretty deep to find the positive for the ACC, but I dug deep enough to find it, Kenton. So I don't see any language in here about this deal being able to be amended before 2031. This is a deal that locks in this structure from 2026 to 2031. So even though, yes, the ACC is making far less revenue than the Big Ten and the SEC, they are guaranteed 17.1% of that revenue until the year 2031. So in a weird way, as bad as this deal might be, if you're looking at reasons why the ACC might survive in some way, shape, or form for the next few years or the next several years, they do get a seat in that quote unquote Power Four table. So I'm assuming, and maybe I'm wrong, a lawyer might correct me on this, that if Florida State and Clemson leave the conference, I'm assuming ESPN cannot blow up this deal and redo it, the college football playoff. We're not talking about the ACC's deal. We're talking about the CFP deal. Assuming ESPN can't throw this one in the garbage and redo it, even if you were to lose a Florida State and a Clemson, the ACC is still guaranteed the same percentage of the CFP revenue. It doesn't necessarily ensure their survival through 2031, but it certainly doesn't hurt.
Yeah, and I get that. I get that you're at least locked in, but my whole thing is, if the SEC and Big Ten want to take their ball and say, hey, we're going to play each other because we've got all the good schools and let that be that, then so what? Make them. Make them do it. Make them do it. Because to me, I think the biggest thing that I look at here is, have you not had champions? Have you not had teams that could compete? Have you not had teams that drew big crowds? So then what are we doing? Yeah. What are we doing? Like, even if we were to assume Florida State's going, do you still not have a decent draw in Clemson? And let's be honest, how many teams in the ACC right now, if they actually were playoff contenders, if they actually were national championship contenders, their viewership, their numbers in terms of the crowd that they bring wouldn't spike to compete with a lot of these Big Ten and SEC schools. It's just, I get it, and I hope that you're right in that this locks up the ACC survivability through 2031. I really and truly do. Because if it doesn't assure that, then we may need to play the classic contemporary, or the contemporary classic diss track from Ice Cube, No Vaseline, which was addressed towards NWA after he left.
We might. Oh man. Well, we'll get into the weeds here on the transfer portal. Top available running back has been crystal balled to an ACC team, and we do have more players exiting Louisville. Now, we talked with Dalton Pence on yesterday's episode, and he did mention Louisville over the scholarship limit, expect more exits. Well, a handful more players are exiting the Cardinals. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. And I'm certainly not done with FanDuel. Folks, I've been winning money, having an awesome time, and this is a great time to sign up at FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We are also proudly brought to you by Monopoly Go. Guys, I need you all to listen up for this huge announcement. I have been tracking the leaderboards every day, keeping my eye on the scores, putting all my heart into it, and I'm super pumped to announce I am finally on top. And that's right. Obviously, I'm talking about the hit mobile game Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great mobile twist on classic Monopoly. You can play anywhere, anytime. You explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Las Vegas to Camelot to the moon, all while raking in a huge fortune. Charge rent on iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly. You can charge your friends rent on your iconic properties, or go after their Monopoly money by pulling bank heists and taking wrecking balls to their landmarks. But my favorite part is the leaderboards, where you can see who's a Monopoly tycoon and who's gone bankrupt. So get yourself on the charts. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store and on Google Play. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. Hey, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Well, Kenton, there has been a significant development as of Monday, a couple of them, on Oregon State transfer running back Damien Martinez. A lot happened on Monday. He canceled a scheduled visit to Kentucky. So he's visited Mississippi State and Arizona. He's had an in-home visit with Miami. He had another in-home visit with Miami on Monday night, and he's visiting Miami in the flesh Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this week. And Pete Nakos of On3 Sports dropped the On3 equivalent of a crystal ball for Damien Martinez to land at the U. This is one I've been feverishly covering this one on Locked On Canes, Kenton. Miami has made Martinez their priority from the very second he entered the transfer portal, and they're going to try to bring this one home this weekend.
Looks like he's got a crystal ball to crystal ball. But take that one home with you. But in all seriousness, I mean, they have done a ton to get him, and it's also kind of worked out well to where I believe his NIL agent is based in Miami. It's a situation where there seems to be a lot of overlap in terms of the type of back that Mario likes, the type of back that he is. Big, powerful guy. Boom. You're looking at a need and a guy who can fill a need. This isn't like they're stacking running backs because they have a ton of good ones and they're like, we could use you. We could use you in short yardage situation, whatever the case may be. No, Martinez will be the guy the minute he steps on campus. Like, that's just – when I'm hearing about a freshman tight end being one of your best ball carriers, you need a running back, okay? Yes. You need a back, and you need one bad. And this is a situation where everything seems to be – it just seems to be perfect. It seems to be a perfect fit from a lot of different angles. It seems to make a lot of sense for Miami. It seems to make a lot of sense for Damien. I think that this is going to be a pretty happy marriage that comes together pretty quickly here.
Yeah, so it seems like this is Miami's situation to lose. We'll see if they can get it over the finish line this coming week. So I'm looking at the transfer portal activity on Monday, Kenton, and there's a lot more activity coming out of Louisville. Now, if you listen to Dalton Pence on our show on Monday, you shouldn't be too surprised by this, I don't think. But Louisville is they've seen 4 more players enter the transfer portal already this week. Dalton mentioned them being over that scholarship limit. So offensive lineman Sam Seacrest entered the portal. Defensive lineman Tafiq Thomas, offensive tackle Luke Burgess, and linebacker Jalen Alderman. I would definitely watch out for Miami with Jalen Alderman. His former linebackers coach at Louisville, Derek Nicholson, D. Nick, is at Miami. And apparently there could be some mutual interest there. Not sure where those other players are going to end up, but some more exits, couple of them more meaningful than others for Louisville today.
Yeah, and I'm not worried about the numbers because Dalton told us this was about the number that would be out. I am, however, a little bit worried that you're seeing starting players and players who were supposed to be big impact guys for you jumping in the portal. That's a little bit more concerning. It's not about the quantity of players that leave, it's about the quality. And you're looking at players who are very much so slotted in to have big impacts in this upcoming season that are all of a sudden jumping off the train, which again, we believe Dalton. We have no reason to believe he was blowing smoke yesterday, but again, it's still a little concerning to see guys that have played as many snaps as as Alderman has, or see guys who were slated to be starters getting in the portal. Yes, that is more common than it has ever been. It's still a reason for a little bit of concern.
Yeah, and by the way, I just as we record this, I just get news on another Miami transfer who's leaving, and this one, a couple of these today have stung me a little bit, Kenton. Miami is losing second-year defensive end Jaden Wayne. Guy didn't play much last year as a true freshman, but was a former high-level 4-star recruit coming out of IMG Academy. I'm very sorry to see him go. And then Miami did lose a contributor who was heading into his senior season. Defensive tackle Jared Harrison Hunt, who's a very good player. Like he was potentially, he's been kind of competing for a starting defensive tackle job this year. If not a starter, he would be one of the first guys off the bench. So I know for sure Harrison Hunt is going to have some impact wherever he ends up. With Jaden Wayne, he's still a guy who's developing, but a couple of the more painful ones, because some of the guys that Miami's lost in the portal so far have been, non-starting players, guys you kind of expected to lose. A couple of these sting me a little bit more, but it's the nature of the game these days.
Yeah, and like we talked about with Louisville, same thing applies to Miami. It's not about, if Miami had 10 guys that you knew these may not be power forward level players, right? Like you might have got sold a lemon by a couple high school coaches. You're okay with those guys leaving. You're lesser okay with guys who are going to be significant contributors leaving, because one of the best things about Miami, one of the things that people talked about in terms of what could have Miami and Charlotte and beyond this year, defensive line talent and depth. And to lose one of the guys that was going to be either a starter or first guy off the bench type of guy, you're losing both talent and depth in that loss. So, it's a situation where you're not super surprised that there is movement at this point in time, because every school's seeing movement. You are surprised by who the movement's coming from at a certain level, because, again, these are high-level guys that are on the go.
Yeah, well, we'll keep monitoring the portal throughout this week. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I'm Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. We'll talk to you guys next time on another episode of Locked On ACC. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.